The world we live in today has been and continues to be profoundly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has had a major impact on the enjoyment of human rights and fundamental freedoms around the world. The pandemic has seriously affected the lives of many groups, and its consequences have been amplified by existing structures of inequality and disadvantage. But the impact on older persons has been particularly devastating. Older persons have shown a greater susceptibility to severe cases of infection and have represented the overwhelming majority of lives lost. However, impact of the pandemic has gone well beyond. The pandemic has highlighted and amplified the age-old problem of ageism and age discrimination that is still so pervasive and widespread in our society. The pandemic has only served to lay bare this uncomfortable truth. The specter of ageism and consequent widespread practice of age discrimination have been having significant impact on the rights of older persons in every aspect of our society. You can be ageist yourself and at the same time suffer from age discrimination. Many recoil from being called an older person, as if being older is something to be lamented or associated with disadvantages. The tragic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on older persons has been well documented in Secretary General's policy brief on the impact of COVID-19 on older people, the report of the independent expert on the enjoyment of all human rights by older persons, Ms. Claudia Mahler, and extensive work by UN agencies, civil society organizations, and the national human rights institutions. And these included potential age discrimination in decisions with regard to older persons' access to medical care, triage, and life-saving measures. Increased risk of neglect, mistreatment, or abuse in care homes and institutions, as well as at home. Reduced access to health services, including home-based visits and community care, disconnections from social networks, and increased risk of social isolation and risks to mental health. An escalation in ageist attitudes, including discrimination against and stigmatization of older persons, as well as disrespectful remarks and hate speech on social media targeting older persons. And digital divide, preventing older persons to access essential information, online services, and social connections. Entrenched ageism is at the root of many of these and other impacts on older persons that continues to render older people invisible in legal and policy framework and data and statistics. A key challenge here is that ageism is so prevalent and widely accepted, we tend not to recognize it as an issue of discrimination and violation of human rights. But in reality, as older persons are a diverse group, the actual situation of some specific groups of older persons may be exacerbated as a result of intersectional or multiple discrimination. Ageist attitudes and practices are frequently a major contributing factor to the disadvantage and discrimination they already suffer on the basis of their gender, race, ethnicity, disability, and so on. Older women are particularly at risk where ageism intersects with gender inequalities. They are more likely to face risks in violence, abuse, and neglect. Multiplicity of discrimination that women suffer during their lifetime has a cumulative impact in old age. Lack of educational opportunities in young age translates in difficulties in entering formal labor market. Informal, unpaid care work that many women perform are not covered by Social Security and therefore older women are more likely than men to live in poverty and deeply affected by crises such as the pandemic. Similarly, intersection between older age and disability results in both aggravated form of discrimination and specific human rights violations against older persons with disability. Older persons with disability tend to have more chronic conditions and less immunity to the pandemic, putting them at more risk of contracting the virus and resulting in death. OSHR's monitoring work, for example, in Ukraine, also found that older persons and persons with disabilities in long-term care facilities are particularly vulnerable to COVID-19 due to their dependency on those who run and support these facilities and the difficulty for carers and residents to practice physical distancing. As we seek to build forward better from this crisis towards a more age-friendly and inclusive society, here are some thoughts on how we can promote concerted and sustained actions to address the pandemic of ageism and to address multiple discrimination many older persons face. First, we need to shift our narratives around older persons, away from ageist, paternalistic view to one that is anchored in full respect for their rights and dignity. Older persons are an incredibly diverse group. Assumptions that older persons are frail or dependent are not only inaccurate, they are harmful. Second, we need to take on the structural barriers at national and international levels that impede older persons' full enjoyment of their human rights. This includes adopting and modifying legal framework for anti-age discrimination, ensuring effective enforcement mechanisms, and implementing programs to reduce and eliminate ageism in various sectors, including health, employment, and education. Third, addressing the intersectional and cumulative impacts of age discrimination would require a multi-sectoral and life course approach. The Madrid International Plan of Action for Aging recognized that policies on aging needs to adopt a broader life course perspective and society-wide view. For women, a life course approach to well-being in old age is particularly important as they face obstacles throughout their life with a cumulative effect on their social, economic, physical, and psychological well-being in their later years. Lastly, we need to adopt a human rights-based approach that places the rights and dignity of older persons at the center of our efforts in building forward better from the pandemic. Older persons are an essential element of the solutions our society so urgently need today. We need to expand, rather than diminish, the role they play in all aspects of our economy and social life. This includes more attention and investment to enable their effective participation in decisions that affect their life, as well as to build stronger systems that guarantees their economic and social rights. In other words, we need to develop a comprehensive and systematic approach to the protection of the human rights of older persons, backed by international legal standards and mechanisms. A comprehensive framework built upon international human rights law would finally put older persons at the center as empowered rights holders and active agents of change, upholding equal rights and dignity and ensuring their effective and meaningful participation in the decision-making processes. The hard lessons learned from the pandemic that caused so much pain and suffering for older persons should be reflected in accelerated efforts towards developing a new international human rights convention on the rights of older persons, which will give us much needed international standards to guide our actions to combat ageism and the intersectionality of age discrimination faced by older persons. Building forward better from the current pandemic is an opportunity to look beyond its immediate responses. It is an opportunity to address structural causes of inequality and invest in a human rights-based approach that will bring the greatest return and contributes to building strong, sustainable, resilient society in which rights and dignity of older persons and all other people are respected and protected. Thank you.